Hey, good morning, guys. Coach Miller over at Stanton River High School in Virginia. Stanton River is a little rural high school on the southern point of Bedford County. Has a little under 1,000 kids, and excited to get a chance to talk to you today. I've been at Stanton River now for about 8 or 9 years, and before I actually was at Stanton River High School, I did counseling with at-risk teenagers, and I would actually go into the homes and I would work with them. I'd work with their families to help them learn how to communicate, how to get along, how to live together. And so did that for several years, but had this one particular case where I went in, and it was a young man. He was about 8 or 9 years old, and he was very angry. That's what they told me going in. And so I went to his house one day to meet him. And I went in, and I was met by this young man in a wheelchair. And so what had happened was when he was 5 or 6 years old, he had actually had a stroke. And they had been unable to get to him fast enough. And so when they did and got him over to the hospital, they ended up having to take both of his legs from the knees down. And on his hands, they actually took his fingers down to the first knuckle. And so this was a young man who was very angry because he felt like life had been taken away from him. And so I went in and I started trying to work with him, and we would meet, and I tried to talk to him. I tried to do some play activities. I tried to do some writing activities, all right there in the house. And it just wasn't working. He was angry. He was lashing out at me. He would lash out at his mother. And he had lost the ability to do for himself. If he had to get somewhere that his wheelchair couldn't get, he had to be carried. And so he was just very angry. But every day he would sit at the window and he would watch out the window as other kids would go down to the playground. And after I saw that a couple times, I kind of got this plan in my head. And I started to say, hey, you know what? Why don't we take a little trip? And we would go down to the playground, and we would sit, and we would watch the other kids play. And he would sit there in his chair, and he would watch them swing, and he would be swinging himself in his own mind because his body would be going back and forth. And that worked for a little bit, and he calmed down. But then he started to get angry again. And what I figured is he was unable to play himself. And so he needed to learn how to play again. And so one day I took him down there and nobody else was around. And I said, you know what? How would you like to swing? So I took him over to the swings, and he was a pretty big guy. But I picked him up and I sat down on the swing, and I sat him in front of me, and I held on to him, and we started to swing. And his face just lit up. And then we went over and we got on a little merry-go-round. And I got him up against one of the poles on the little merry-go-round. And I got behind him, and I had one leg off. And I was kicking and getting it to go around. And he was squealing, and he was excited. And all of a sudden, he came alive again. And he started to get motivation to help himself get to a point where he could begin to do it himself again and learn some independence. And you know what? I think sometimes us as teachers fall into that category. We forget how to play. We forget, and we think we're unable to play. We see ourselves as being limited at times. You know, our kids certainly do. When they come into the classroom, and if yours is a class, I teach algebra and geometry. There's a good population of kids who hate math. And they come in with this preconceived notion that they're not going to do well, that they're not going to be able to play in algebra and geometry, that they're not going to be able to do, that they are not sufficient. And I have to overcome that every year. But I think us as teachers as well fall into that category. You know, when we first start teaching, we come in, and even if we know our content really well and we think we know how to teach it, we start to adjust things. And over the first couple years, we figure out how to teach. We figure out how to teach in such a way that the kids can pass the SOL. They can pass that state test. And we start to see success. But then I see a lot of teachers who get stuck in that, and they've done the same thing every year for the last 10 years. The same worksheet that they did 10 years ago is what they go to every year. And rightfully so, because they get success. But nothing ever changes, and they forget how to play inside of their curriculum. And then all of a sudden, they're asked to change. And we just had a great example of that here with the pandemic. Maybe things were going along really well in your class. Maybe they weren't. But then all of a sudden, you couldn't teach them in person. You had to find a way to get this material to them that was new. And it's hard because we're being asked to change, and because just passing the SOL isn't good enough. We don't even have the SOL at this point because of the pandemic, but just passing isn't good enough. And if you think about it, it's logical because we're helping prepare these students for life. And if all they know how to do is pass the test, are we truly giving them everything they need? And I began to question myself with that about a year ago, and I started to change the way that I taught. It wasn't easy because I'd had success. I had success with the SOL. I had kids passing. I had kids enjoying class. But I began to think, what else do they need to know? What do they need to know in order to be successful once they leave me? Successful once they go to college? Successful once they get into a job? And I started to look at things around project-based learning. And so I began to change some of the things in my classroom. Maybe you have the choice to change. Maybe you don't have the choice to change. But it's a daunting task when you look at the big picture and go, man, I need to do all of this. Really, we just have to pick a place to start. We have to pick a place and say, you know what, I'm going to try this. Just like we did when we first became teachers. For me, this year, I was working with the world history teacher, and we decided to develop some projects that were across the curriculum that included both algebra and history, and we would use them to teach the SOLs, but also teach them how to do things in life, how to cooperate, how to plan a project, how to achieve success, how to measure success on a project, how to find the right people to help you accomplish your goal. And so we started by doing a trading project. They were learning about the trade routes, and we designed this project, and we thought it was pretty great. But it was a project where they would research one of the trade places, and then they would trade commodities, trade exports and imports with one another. And as the math portion, they wrote equations that factored in not only the cost of the goods, but how much it would cost to ship the goods back to the place where they came from. And so we got into this project, and every Friday we would set aside time where they would work on the project. And what we found was that some of the kids did really well with it. Some of the kids didn't do really well with it. And so there came a point where we had to actually stop the project because we had some doing it, some not doing it, and they couldn't trade with one another if not everybody was participating. And so we had to realize that what we were doing wasn't working. And that's kind of my second point. After you pick a place to start, you got to realize that you're not going to get it right all the time. And we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to always be right because, what if the kids realize that I screwed up, and what'll that do to what they think of me? And we kind of sit ourselves on a pedestal at times as teachers and don't allow ourselves the same grace. But, when we admit that we got it wrong, sometimes that is a learning opportunity as well. I would say actually all the time that would be a learning opportunity as well, because we can teach them how to be wrong, and how to be wrong gracefully to yourself and to others, and to not get frustrated and angry with it. and how to process that in a way that helps you do better the next time. So we actually stopped our project and we had a conversation with the whole class and said, hey, you know what, this isn't working. Let's talk about why it isn't working. Let's talk about what we need to do better. And so we had to come up with a game plan so that people would cooperate. And that people understood that there were consequences, not only themselves, but to others, when you didn't cooperate. And so we came up with a contract that people in groups would read through together, and that they would sign, and it would assign roles, and that assign expectations. And through that, we also taught them the soft skills of cooperation, the soft skills of working together, the soft skills of setting expectations. And we also taught them the SOLs. So we could do both. We weren't just limited to a worksheet that practiced the SOL. We could teach them other soft skills that would help them to become successful. As teachers, we can struggle too with what it is that we feel like we need to be in control of. Because when we feel in control, we feel like, you know what, I can live in this classroom. So we find a starting point. We aren't afraid of being wrong. And sometimes we have to decide what it is we're going to try to control. Because when we come up with a project, there are things we need to control, and there's things we don't need to control. We want to be able to measure success on the soft skills. We want to measure success on the SOLs. So we put together a rubric. We put together a rubric that helps students understand, here are your checkpoints of what I'm expecting. But there are other details that we don't have to be in control of. Our second project that we did had to do with the age of exploration. They were studying the age of exploration in our history, where people were discovering new countries. And, being in a rural county, there's a lot of kids who never actually get outside of the county. So we designed a project where they would find a place outside of our state that they wanted to travel to. And they researched that place and found out things about it. And as part of the process, they found a place to stay while they were there. They calculated how much food they would need while they were there. They found a rental car, and they figured out how much gas it would take for the number of miles it would take to go round trip to get there. And so throughout this project, they learned a lot of skills that could be very helpful to them in life if they were to get outside of the county. How to find a car, how to find a hotel. But then they created linear equations that helped them figure out, can I do it within a certain budget? If the car costs this amount, and I pay this amount per mile based on my miles per gallon of my car, at what point am I going to spend $500? And they could design equations to do that, which helped them meet their SOL, but also helped them to develop soft skills that would help them be successful in life. So I had picked out several cars that they could choose from. I was scaffolding their learning, and so the kids they picked out some particular cars, and I had one kid come to me and he said, "Hey, I'd like to rent a tractor trailer truck." And my first inclination was, come on, man, I came up with the ideas on what you need, which cars you can choose from. It makes it easy on me because I had already calculated already done the equations, already calculated how much it would cost. I knew the right answer, so it made it easy on me just to use the cars that I had selected for them to choose from. But why do I need to control that? I was controlling it because it was easy on me. So after I quickly processed it in my head, I said, you know what? If you're willing to put in the extra work to go find a tractor trailer truck, to figure out how much it's to rent it, to figure out how many miles per gallon that is, and to work that in, you're learning even more than what I was requiring you to do. Were we still hitting the rubric? Yes. Was he doing more than what the rubric asked for? Yes. But it was what he wanted to learn. and in the context of what I wanted him to learn. And so that's something I don't need to control, and so I had to learn to let go of control and to let them make decisions, because that helps them learn how to make decisions in life. And then our third project, I've really felt like we finally nailed it, because we worked with our engineering group at school. We worked with the science group. We worked with the math, and obviously math with me, but also with the history group. And we had the kids design guillotines. They were learning about the French Revolution. And they designed guillotines, and then they built them. They built them out of popsicle sticks and string and pulleys, and then we cut hot dogs with the guillotines. We used a little plastic blade, and we figured out how much weight it would take to attach to that guillotine to chop the hot dog. And they used functions and function tables to figure out and make hypothesis, test it, and ultimately find out how much weight it would take to cut a hot dog. And there was so much that they learned through the project. And there were times actually during the project that we were able just to stand there and watch them, because they were engaged, they were excited, and they were learning not just the math skills, but they were learning about each other. And we took time to stop and process and talk about issues. And when groups struggled, we had a structure where they would come to us and they would present their issue. And if it was between two people, they both got a chance to talk. And we became facilitators, and we mediated for them these conflicts. And so over 3-9 weeks, we started not knowing what we were doing, and we just picked a place to start. We tried something new, and for you, that may be doing a new app. It may be doing Nearpod. It may be doing a pair grid, a pair deck. It may be doing video lessons for the very first time. But you pick a place to start. You realize it's not going to be perfect. And a way you can help it become even better is to partner with others who know what they're doing better than you. And it takes a little bit of humility. But even when we were doing the guillotines and I had that idea, I knew there were other people on campus that knew more than me about it. So I went to engineering. I went to the science department. And I talked to the physics teacher about using the force equation, and allowed him to help me design the project. And, I also had to realize that there was going to be things that I could not control, or I didn't need to control. What I needed to control, I put that into my rubric. What I didn't need to control, I allowed the students to have a voice and a choice in their education. And you know what? It paid off, because they were learning the things they wanted to in the context of what I wanted them to learn. And then, as with the guillotine project, I would say the last thing is celebrate the success. Celebrate the success not just with yourself and feeling good about what you accomplished or the people that you incorporated, but with the students. Help them understand that when you are successful, that it's a time to stop and celebrate. Not in a prideful way, but in the fact that you accomplished what you set out to do. And we have to get good at doing that, not just handing it back with a smiley face on a piece of paper, but actually processing what was good, so they can identify the skills and the things that they learned, so that they can build upon them when they become successful. That way we don't end up like that young man, angry and upset because we don't know how to do it or we're not good enough. But we learn how to play again with inside of our curriculum and what we're trying to accomplish, so that we can have fun again, so that we can have fun when we go in to teach, and we can still help them be successful, but so that we can also prepare them for what it is they will be facing in their life, because at the end of the day, those are the things that they're going to remember. All right, guys, glad I got to talk to you today. Thank you for the time.